As I introduce our speakers, Emily Scarr, I think, Emily, you've been participating in this just as long as I have, if not longer, for all 7 years. But it's really great to have you back. Emily is a senior advisor with Maryland PIRG, where she provides campaign strategy, communications, and policy leadership while spearheading the organization's energy and utility work. Since joining in 2013, she has led winning coalitions to strengthen democracy, protect public health, curb toxic chemicals, including PFAS, and advance clean, affordable, and consumer-friendly energy policies for Maryland. Joining Emily is Laurel Peltier. Laurel is the founder of Retail Energy Revealed, an organization dedicated to giving consumers clear, factual information about deregulated energy markets. She also serves as the chair of the Maryland Energy Advocates Coalition, where she has pushed for meaningful reforms to Maryland's residential retail energy market to better protect and empower consumers. Since 2014, Laurel has worked directly with thousands of limited income families in utility crisis, helping BGE customers manage and stabilize their energy bills. I'm really excited to learn from both of you today here, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Emily and Laurel.
Good afternoon. I'm Laurel Peltier, and I'm going to share what's been happening on consumer utility bills to help set the stage for this conference. And then I'm going to hand it off to Emily Scarr, who will explain the whys. Next slide, please. We're going to start with the basics just to make sure we're all on the same page. Your utility bill combines two primary components, delivery and supply charges. Delivery rates are how much your regulated utility charges your account to be hooked up to their energy utility. Delivery, the same as the distribution fee, pays for utility infrastructure like poles, wires, and pipes. Supply rates cover the cost of electricity or the gas commodity based on how much your home or apartment used that month. Supply also pays to cover the cost of electric transmission lines. For most Marylanders, delivery rates and supply costs both increased in 25 and will again in 26, leaving Maryland families from all income levels paying a lot more, as I'll show you. Here's what's happened with both delivery and supply rates. Next slide. Let's start with delivery charges. Gas and electric utilities distribute energy to Maryland homes under a state-granted monopoly. Because these monopolies have no competition, utilities rates are approved by the state's regulatory body called the Public Service Commission. We all call it the PSC. Since BG&E was acquired by Exelon in 2012, gas delivery charges have more than tripled, about 3 times the rate of inflation. Under the 2013 STRIDE legislation, BG&E and Columbia Gas both hit stride hard and have averaged over 8% yearly gas delivery increases. They've spent and will continue to spend billions of ratepayer funds replacing old pipes. BG&E gas customers now pay about $2 in gas delivery charges for every dollar they spend on the gas itself. BG&E gas delivery rates are going up again in January 1st and also on February 1st to cover for 2023 cost overruns. Washington Gas customers have been paying about half as much for gas delivery than BG&E customers, but that could soon change as WGL just proposed an $83 million rate increase. Next slide. An interesting thing that happened this past decade is that many BG&E gas customers didn't notice the gas delivery rate increases because their gas supply rates plummeted at the same time that their gas delivery rates were increasing. Cheap frac gas starting around 2009 translated into cheap electricity supply. The consumer gas savings masked the constant uptick of BG&E gas delivery rates. Next slide. In addition to gas rates climbing, the gas delivery rates, electric delivery rates are also going up. In 2012, again, Exelon purchased 3 Maryland utilities, BG&E, Pepco, and Delmarva, and Exelon now services 83% of Maryland's 2.3 million residential accounts. These utilities have increased delivery rates for gas and electricity at a rate far outpacing inflation. BG&E's electric delivery rate has doubled since 2010. It's about twice the inflation. And both Pepco and Delmarva electricity delivery rates increases are even higher. And pennies matter in home energy, as you'll see later. On top of everything, an unexpected and painful rate. Let me make sure I got this right. Go to the next slide. Yeah, on top of everything, an unexpected and painful rate pressure has spiked PJM competitive markets electricity supply. Emily will outline our current data center phenomenon, but like the Fifth Dimension song, for consumers and businesses, electricity supply rates have also gone up, up, and away. Electricity supply has climbed every year since 2019. And again, Emily's going to dive into the details of why. But just to give you an idea, because I think everybody on this webinar is feeling it. In 2019, the average SOS, your electricity cost per kilowatt hour, was 7 cents. And in 2026, it will hover around 17 cents. That is just supply. And as Emily will explain, PJM electricity supply rates aren't expected to fall in the near term. Gas supply rates also went up a little bit in 2025. And other than the Ukraine 2022 spike, gas commodity rates have been relatively steady. So the next slide. So what does all this mean for the average customer? Here's a pretty close Maryland residential average yearly bill today. I used gas as the heat source, but an electricity heated home can often look even worse than this. And basically what's going on, if you look at the average 10,000 kilowatt hour using electricity and about 1,000 therms of gas with the new rates, it's around $4,000 a year, which is $333 a month. And if you compare that to like 2021, that is about 200, what? No, it's about $125 a month. So sorry for the math error there. That was my fault because the difference between 333 and 210 is 125. But that is $1,500 for the average bill. And that is why everybody's pretty much freaking out about energy. I really want to highlight, since I do work primarily on low income, that the families getting pummeled right now are our state's limited income segment, which is 450,000 families. That's about a quarter of the state. And I want to put a little face to who this segment is. If you took the majority of each demographic and factor of low income, it makes a lot more sense why this group of Marylanders is struggling to keep their power on. This segment is mostly seniors who live alone on fixed incomes, about $1,500 a year, a month. 60% of them rent, and those rentals use almost a third more energy than non-low income apartments. And because 64% of these rentals were built before 1980, they often have outdated and inefficient heating. And our HVAC systems, our heaters, our air conditioners are the largest energy user in a house. And the top 10 areas, interestingly, are the rural areas with higher use of propane and oil and resistance heating. And Baltimore City's added to that list too. So energy burdens have radically climbed for low income, sitting around 14% of their income, and 6 is ideal. So next slide. So now that I've thoroughly bummed you out, I think a really good question to ask is what can we do about it? And today and tomorrow, legislators will share their bills that they hope will help solve the rate crisis. But if there's any silver lining to this rate crisis, I am definitely seeing that consumers are now more engaged in energy and are willing to take actions that lower rates and usage. Reducing energy usage is a win for our environment by reducing greenhouse gases and also reducing our budgets. I'm going to fly through a few ideas and programs, and we have all a very big, comprehensive how to lower your utility bill. And I'm going to fly through it because it would honestly be about a 4-hour webinar. But my hope in the next few slides is just to inspire you to consider taking some steps to lower your bill and also to share your time and talents within your community to get these real world actions more widely known. These ideas are written in a 6-step guide and everything is on PIRG's awesome toolkit. So the next slide. So you might find it interesting that the first step in getting a handle on this is to actually know how much energy your home or rental uses. Is it too much? Is it too little? Or is it okay? And these two charts are very unusual because I worked with contractors to set out by the number of bedrooms your house or apartment has, what would be a normal level of energy use. And it's just it's not perfect, but it just gives you an idea. Are you high, low, or okay? Because most people get e-bills, and trust me, I've helped thousands of people, and very few know their normal usage. It's mostly driven by your HVAC. So that is really the number one step for everyone in the state is really understand your usage. It's on BG&E bills, and you can get it online or you can call into your utility and look at it by year because weather drastically changes your month-to-month usage. Next slide. Now, here's some ideas on how to actually change your rates. And I know everybody on this probably knows about offsite solar farms, but just in case, enroll in community solar. It takes 2 minutes, and this is an easy step. And it's also for renters and homeowners. Enroll and save. The best news is that community solar credits will be included on all utility bills in a few short weeks for a one bill option. Subscribing to an offsite solar farm nets at least a 10% savings off of most of your electricity. And it's even better. Limited income families can save 20 or even 25%. There are no tricky contracts or variable rates, and I've listed the open solar farms right now. But if you really want to double up on your green, because this is an environmental summit, you can buy Green E certified RECs through TerraPass. And this step would actually surpass what retail energy suppliers were offering. Each REC is $8. It's Green E certified and it will cover 1,000 kilowatt hours of your usage. So for about $50, which can be paid out of about $200 of community solar savings, you will have maxed out on green energy if installing solar panels isn't an option at your house. Next slide. So this list is what you will normally see on how to save. And this is why we put it in the guide, because some of this is easy and some of this is hard. But what I want to tell you is that every single account holder in Maryland can get a free quick home energy checkup. It's very, very useful. It's 45 minutes and they come in. And did you know that also Empower funded our free HVAC tune-ups? That's for renters and for homeowners. Get to know your heater. Change out those air filters. Ditch that old refrigerator in the garage. And I go into many homes these days that still have these old style non-programmable thermostats. We're finding many clients have also set them really high. So Department of Energy suggests 68 in the winter, 78 in the summer. This is just a brief idea of some of the simple steps. So now the next slide gets to the harder step. And I really encourage anybody who owns a home to please complete an Empower subsidized energy audit for $100. And by the way, this is free for limited income accounts because you would be using the Department of Community and Housing Services, DHCD. The audit, its findings and suggestions allow you to access Steep Empower funded discounts for insulation, HVAC, heat pumps, air sealing, and other products. This photo is at my house and it's the post blower door test. I have a classic Mid-Atlantic Baltimore brick leaky home that before the Empower work was at $9,400 in leakage and it went down to $5,900 and rebates paid for about 50% of the work that we had done. There is so much available in our state to lower energy usage, from electrification, adding solar panels, geothermal. And with today's high rates, people are a lot more interested. I've included some really cool utility cheat sheets on the toolkit. And also, just if people call in, especially if you're a legislator, like, okay, if this person, this is what you would do. I wanted you to know I have an Instagram. It's called Energy Help Desk, and the guide is in the toolkit. So now you have a better feel for what consumers are experiencing, and Emily will now explain the key policies and factors and how and why Maryland got here and future steps. Thank you so much.
Thanks. I was trying to paste the toolkit, and I will. Hi, I'm Emily Scarr. I'm a senior advisor with Maryland PIRG based in Baltimore. And I'm going to take some time to explain why bills have risen now that Laurel has done such a good job explaining where we're at. So first, we're going to talk about delivery rates, and then we'll talk about supply. That as well. So delivery rates are tied directly to utility spending. The more utility spends, their larger opportunity they have to profit. Functionally, gas and electric utilities are responsible for maintaining the safety and reliability of the system to deliver energy to our homes through maintenance and repairs. They make their highest profits when they make capital investments, new pipes, new poles, new wires. For these projects, they're financed like a mortgage or a high interest credit card. They pay for the cost up front with investor money. And if the PSC determines that spending is appropriate, it's paid back over a long period of time, decades even, including compounding interest and taxes. The rate and the amount of time varies, but to give you a ballpark, most recently, these rates have been around a 9% interest rate or annual return rate. This makes sense for some investments and is in fact why we turn to wealthy individuals to own our utilities in the first place in order to ensure we had enough capital to build an electrical grid that could serve everyone throughout the entire country and our rural communities. But it also creates a powerful incentive for wasteful spending, and that incentive to build is no longer lined up with public interest priorities the same way it was when we first established our utilities. So we rely on the legislature and the Public Service Commission to keep a careful watch in order to deter wasteful spending. So as you can see here, BG&E's profits have skyrocketed in the last decade, jumping from about 147 million in 2010 to 527 million in 2024. And the company is also on track to be even higher in 2025. BG&E's profits were relatively stable until 2012. I keep meaning to extend this chart further. And that's when Exelon bought BG&E. Pepco, you can go to the next slide, was taken over by Exelon in 2017. And profits then jumped from around 205 million in 2018 to 390 million in 2024. So, this is to combined BG&E and Pepco profits. I put those together. So I'm not suggesting that all the spending was wasteful, nor that utilities shouldn't have an opportunity to profit. But when profits spike in a certain way and our service doesn't improve or even gets worse, there's certainly a problem that we need to address. So you can go to the next slide. There are two public policy decisions that we believe have really driven the increase of delivery rates for customers. The first is the STRIDE Law of 2013, and the second is multi-year rate making pilot, which launched in 2020. Both of these policies have exacerbated the utilities' incentive to overspend while also weakening critical safeguards to prevent wasteful spending. So, for example, one of the key drivers in BG&E's gas delivery rates tripling, as Laurel explained, and their profits increasing so much has been their gas pipeline replacement program known as
Do
Operation.
you want me to answer those questions?
Go on mute, Laurel. Where was I? that was Operation Pipeline, which is part of operates under the Stride Law. So the way that the Stride Law exacerbated this dynamic of incentivizing capital spending was it allowed gas utilities to charge customers for gas capital spending more quickly. And so it's incentivized increased spending without there being added requirements in law to ensure that the gas utilities were prioritizing safety or even operating in a cost-effective way. The law was passed in around 2013 under the banner of safety as a means to encourage the utilities to more quickly address the risk of our aging cast iron pipes, which we have pipes that are 80, 100 plus years old in Baltimore and the region around. However, they're already legally obligated to maintain the safety of the system. So Maryland PIRG's position has long been that any additional financial incentive was and continues to be unnecessary. They need to do their job, and if there's work that needs to be done to replace pipes, they have all the authority they need to do to make it happen. And so in December, Maryland PIRG Foundation released a report which analyzes BG&E's 2025 Operation Pipeline work. And our analysis found that the program is not properly prioritizing safety and could actually be slowing the work to repair or replace the riskiest pipes while driving up massive rate increases and utility profits and locking us into an expensive new gas system. You can go to the next slide. So as you can see from their project selection, of the 34 active projects in 2025, 97% were selected for pressure conversion reasons, and only 32% were selected based on risk scores, which is BG&E's internal process for assessing the likelihood of a gas main failure. So instead of just addressing the old cast iron pipes or the mains that are most risk at failure, because not all cast iron pipes are leaking or going to fail, they're converting sections of the system to higher pressure. This pressure conversion is more expensive, more time intensive, and more complicated. It involves not only replacing cast iron mains, but also the plastic service lines that go into individual homes and regulators neighborhood by neighborhood. So 85% of the gas mains they replaced in 2025 were cast iron, which leaves 15% that weren't. And their selection process suggests that many of those are not necessarily leaking nor necessarily requiring replacement instead of repair or relining. And more than 40% of the service lines replaced in 2025 were plastic. So they're replacing all of these mains, all these service lines and regulators without even considering options to repair, reline, or look at alternatives to gas pipelines entirely, like targeted electrification programs. And focusing on repair or replacement of just the riskiest pipes using leak detection technology, which they have, would not only be faster and cheaper, it would also make us safer than what we're doing now. So on the other hand, installing and paying for an entirely new higher pressure gas system might make sense if we had plans to keep using gas for the long term, but we don't. Again, we're speaking to an environmental audience here, so as you're well aware, we know we need to reduce our use of fossil fuels in our homes, including for home heating, to reduce both air pollution in and outside of our homes, and to help, bring down heating bills. Marylanders are increasingly already opting in to use electric heat pumps for heating and cooling because they are the most efficient option in to help bring down their bills. But even if we didn't plan to reduce the use of our gas, the way we are approaching this replacement is neither cost effective nor safety driven. So you can go to the next slide. The project has already been one of the biggest reasons we've seen our gas rates jump in BG&E territory. And if BG&E completes its total projected stride work of $4 billion, it's going to cost customers $19.5 billion to pay back. And most of that difference is the profits to the company. Washington Gas is also undertaking a similar gas pipeline replacement program, but has so far been much slower to spend money. That's a big reason why Washington Gas customers pay half as much for gas delivery as we do in BG&E territory. But BG&E's results should serve as a stark warning, however, that we need to reform their program as well before more harm is done. And they did just put in that $82.5 million rate increase request. Next slide. So during the most recent legislative session, we made some great headway in adding consumer protections to the STRIDE law by passing the Ratepayer Protection Act as part of the Next Generation Energy Act. The changes we made include requiring gas pipeline spending to prioritize safety and be cost effective, including looking at non-pipeline alternatives. The ball is now in the PSC's court, both on, Washington Gas's rate increase as well as the project list for BG&E and Washington Gas in 2026. The PSC is accepting comments on Washington Gas's project list right now. So if you're if you're in Washington Gas territory, I suggest you get comments in by the end of the month. We hope they will have a similar process with BG&E to ensure that 2026 projects are in line with the new law. The Public Service Commission also took their own action in 2025. They ended the expensive utilities gas pipeline expansion incentive, known as line extension allowances, which allowed them to charge gas line expansion to new homes to their entire rate base. Once finalized, this decision will save Maryland gas customers more than $1 billion over the next 10 years. So that's a huge victory. So the next slide, I want to talk about multi-year rate plans, which have led to rapidly increasing electric delivery rates in a similar way as the STRIDE program has for gas. So every Exelon utility owned in the state, which is BG&E, Pepco, and Delmarva Power, have used this alternative form of rate making in the last 5 years. Until 2020, the way utilities rates were set was that utilities spent money to maintain the poles, wires, and pipes, and for our homes and businesses. And like any business, they recovered this cost and profits through charging their customers. But since, like other businesses, they do have a monopoly on the service with no competition, the state plays a role in approving how much they could charge their customers. And the aim is for them to set a rate that is based on the need to cover their cost and a reasonable profit. Generally speaking, it doesn't need to change that much year to year. Before 2020, if a utility ever wanted to increase rates, they would go to the PSC and have to make the case by showing receipts, the money spent, to justify that, no, our operating expenses have gone up in a substantial way that's not going to change, so we need to change our base rates. Some Maryland utilities rarely asked for rate increases, and the PSC would decide if that spending was reasonable and prudent and only then increase bills to recover the money that had already been spent. The money going out the door above what was being approved wasn't recovered. So investors were cautious with increased spending. It served as a natural disincentive against wasteful spending. In 2020, things changed when the Public Service Commission launched a pilot program for BG&E to request a multi-year rate hike. It's the reverse of the traditional process. So BG&E asked for approval for spending up front by showing plans and forecasts of increased spending. The PSC then decides how much of that increase to approve, and then it was phased in over 3 years of rate increases. This happened again in 2023. And despite being pre-approved, however, which lowers their financial risk, their profit margin stayed pretty much the same height. The system, we are concerned, encourages utilities to forecast massive spending, giving them more opportunity to profit, especially on these expensive capital projects. So we just finished the last year, 2026. This is our final year of BG&E's second multi-year rate increase. Things got even messier in the process, though, when BG&E actually overspent their projected spending and has returned to the PSC asking for more money. This is known as the reconciliation process, which is a win-win for shareholders and can be a lose-lose for customers. Well, the PSC can reject this overspending, and they actually did last month reject over half of what BG&E requested. The incentive to overspend and drive up rates is just really strong under this system. So since the PSC granted BG&E the first multi-year rate increase in 2020, rates have increased rapidly. Pepco and Delmarva Power, which like BG&E also subsidiaries of Exelon and got this 3-year multi-year rate increase in 2020, we've seen their rate increases have been at least 40% higher than what we saw in Maryland from 2006 all the way to 2020. But again, it's not all bad news. You can go to the next slide. Again, during the most recent legislative session, we made some headway in adding consumer protection to both of these policies. So in addition to the changes to gas pipeline spending I already outlined, the Next Generation Energy Act requires multi-year rate plan proposals to benefit the public and directs the Public Service Commission to end the reconciliation process for spending above projections. It also prevents utilities from charging ratepayers for trade associations and private jets. I don't think we have time, but I'll put in the chat, and that's what I pasted earlier by accident, links to these clips on Instagram of Delegate Charkoudian and Delegate Crosby talking about that progress we made, which was so exciting. And go to the next slide. So it's now up to our Public Service Commission to enforce these laws. We expect all of these policies to be put to the test in 2026. BG&E's final rate increase went into effect January 1st, as I said, so they may be coming back to the Public Service Commission in February or March to ask for another rate increase, whether it's a multi-year increase or a one-year rate increase, we don't know. We are waiting for the PSC to release the results of their study of the pilot program. PEPCO also proposed a rate increase last fall, and Washington Gas did just a couple weeks ago. And there are a number of public policy proposals this legislative session that could push for more utility accountability, which I think I'm going to talk about later today. Before I turn to supply costs, I will highlight that Maryland PIRG spend most of our time focusing on this, stopping distribution rate increases, and that's for two reasons. Unlike supply rates, they are directly controlled by the state. And once they go up, they are much harder, if not impossible, to bring down. Supply rates do tend to fluctuate. And so while it's definitely painful when they go up, we can bring them down and they will come down in the mid to long term. If you have any questions on this, please hold them. Well, I don't know if probably won't have any time for questions, but I'm always happy to connect offline. So next slide, we can talk about supply costs. Laurel flagged this already, but gas supply costs rose about 24% last winter. Electric supply costs rose up to 25% for some customers in Maryland in 2025 and aren't expected to come down for at least a few years. But as I said, that while this is very alarming, supply rates can be volatile. And that's one of the reasons it's really important to keep distribution rates under control. So there is a little room for volatility. But because our distribution rates are already so high, that's why people are not being able to handle this increase in supply costs. You can go to the next slide. Electric supply costs are controlled by PJM, which is our regional grid operator. Their job is to manage our electrical transmission grid and which energy projects can connect to the grid, as well as managing a yearly auction to set the price of electricity. PJM should serve as a traffic cop to ensure the right balance of supply and demand so that electricity is both affordable and reliable. You can go to the next slide. PJM is controlled by its stakeholders. It's largely dominated by fossil fuel companies and electric utilities. While our electric utility bills are going up, these companies and utilities are reaping in massive profits for both the production of energy as well as the transmission of electricity and transmission lines. Maryland PIRG Foundation, as well as state agencies, consumer advocates, and a bipartisan group of state legislators and governors have been very critical of PJM, its governance structure, and its anti-consumer decisions that have driven up bills. So some of our top concerns have been that first, PJM is making it too hard for cheaper, clean energy like solar-connected batteries to connect to the grid and bring down prices. Second, PJM has been setting rules that pad the profits of its utilities and fossil fuel companies at the expense of ratepayers. And third, PJM has not properly planned for nor assessed cost appropriately for projected increase in demand from data centers. So compared to other grid managers, PJM has one of the longest timelines in the country for connecting to new clean energy projects. There's enough clean energy and battery storage projects to power 60 million homes awaiting approval at PJM. 98% of those projects awaiting approval are renewable energy projects. So fundamentally, this auction that's led to our really high prices has been flawed. In theory, the reason we would have an auction price that is so high is to signal to energy developers that they should propose projects to meet increased demand. However, if projects are already proposed to PJM and PJM's the reason they're not getting allowed to connect to the queue, there's something fundamentally wrong with this system in that we are just rewarding our legacy power plants at the ratepayers' expense without sending those market signals we want to be sending and just providing them with windfall profits. And so while we've been critical that PJM has stifled the connection of clean energy to the grid, PJM is also projecting a massive increase in demand due to data centers. I will flag that this is unclear if and how much this increase is being exaggerated. Maryland Electric customers are already seeing high rates because of this projected increase in demand and increased transmission costs for data centers out of state. So the idea that we need more energy is not based on current increased use in Maryland. In fact, we're projecting pretty stable use in the state for now from residential users. It's based on projected increases in the future or current increases from out-of-state data centers, but it's PJM, it's Baltimore, Maryland regions, including Pepco territory, that are in our small businesses that are bearing the cost of those new large users. In addition, Maryland customers are suffering from the bad auction results. There are a couple additional decisions at PJM on the supply side that have really hurt us in particular. The first is when Talon Energy announced its plan to close the coal-fired power plants at Brandon Shorge. PJM granted BG&E a no-bid contract to build a new transmission line to compensate for the lost power. The Office of the People's Counsel protested that proposal because it didn't undergo a competitive procurement process, nor did they consider other more cost-effective alternatives to the transmission, including putting like battery storage at the site. But FERC approved the project as PJM requested, and since BG&E's cost estimates have doubled. So they put in a bid at $800 million. It's already up to $1.5 billion, all of which we'll pay for. And one note there is often we'll hear from our utilities that they don't profit on supply rates, but if they own transmission, they do. And this is one of the examples of where they're seeing increased profits and increased bills for us to the utilities. The good news, of course, is that transmission line will be incredibly powerful. It's expected to bring in more power than was being produced at Brandon Shores. So we do have the plan in place for once that power line is complete and so that the coal-fired power plants can finish the retirement. PJM also excluded those two power plants from its supply pool when it did its electricity auction that year, which contributed up to 65% of the bill increases we were seeing for supply. While the good news is they changed the rules, so that decision didn't go forth in the next auction. It's just a clear example of how these decisions hurt consumers. And of course, Maryland ratepayers are also, I should say, subsidizing these coal plants to stay online, paying them more than they were receiving before, because PJM hadn't planned for their retirement in advance of their announcement. I could keep going. So another example of PJM's decisions hurting Marylanders, and particularly PJM, as folks know, have proposed the highly controversial transmission line, the Piedmont project. And I haven't gotten an update this lately, but the original proposal was to charge Maryland ratepayers for the building of that line, which would cost about $800 million is what has been projected, even though the massive amounts of the energy that is required that is making us build that transmission line is for our data centers in Northern Virginia, not increased usage in Maryland. Traditionally, transmission costs are paid by the stakeholders responsible for increasing the transmission needs. And so there's a 45% increase in energy use in Virginia, and we are predicting load stability in BG&E territory, BG&E Pepco, Maryland, so it doesn't quite make sense. So if it's not clear yet, I'll say again, the increases we're seeing in our electric supply rates are not because there's not enough electricity right now. We have enough electricity for the near term. The increases we're seeing in our bills are because of PJM decisions that are padding energy company and utility profits and forecasted increases in demand for data centers. So that's not to say these won't come and we shouldn't plan for it. But it does mean, we should be working to start getting new energy projects offline, of course. It means that we should be careful and that this crisis doesn't lead to even worse decisions that for our environment or for ratepayers. Maryland legislators have been pushing to study data center impacts and try to ensure ratepayers aren't covering the cost. You're going to hear a bunch of bills being proposed on this year. as well as ensuring that data centers pay the cost of new generation and transmission. So stay tuned to hear about the specific proposals. Excuse me. Maryland PIRG is focusing a lot on supporting policies to help cut red tape and support clean energy deployment like solar and battery storage, as well as continuing to do public education about PJM, its decision-making processes, and these, specific examples of how bad decisions have really led to increased bills and trying to refute some of the misinformation there. So I think that's all I've got. I know it's a lot of information, but we didn't want to leave anything out. So hopefully Laurel and I touched on the highlights. Thanks, Matt, so much. It's always lovely to see you. One of my favorite events of the year. We'll paste some links in the chat.
Yeah, Emily, thank you so much. Laurel, thank you so much. There was a number of great questions that came in, so please make your way over to the Q&A feature and make sure to get those answered. And yeah, thanks for a great, really high level and really down in the weeds kind of topic. So I love both of those. It was personal. It got into the things that people can do, and it really explained these supply and demand issues. So thank you very much to both of you.